You.
Welcome back to Northwest Digital News. I'm Kevin Hunter with Chris Bornstead and Kyle Torgerson in studio. Today is Monday, February 26th. Kyle, kick us off with a report on the weather.
The weather. Well, 1 second as I pull it up.
I caught him by surprise.
So, this week it will be staying in the mid 40s while it cycles between wanting to snow, raining, and wanting to be sunny.
Yay. And it looks like we have a little bit of sun in our forecast here for today and for coming up on Saturday. But Chris, you were seeing some other news on weather as well. What was that about?
Yeah, I was seeing that it's supposed to snow again tonight, and it's supposed to switch over about to just straight snow tonight about 10 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember how much it said it was supposed to get, but definitely snow. Yeah.
If you're in the hillsides, take that seriously.
Yeah, you're gonna get some snow for sure.
Because those roads get really treacherous fast. You have to come down the hillside. I did that on, I don't remember if it was, Wednesday night. I drove out of the hills on Wednesday night, probably about an hour later than we should have. And it took us about 25 minutes to get off the hill and into town. So going nice as the road was just slicker. It's not so bad thing. Well, today we're going to cover some other subjects. Nanocrystal electricity. This actually has a long history, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But the reason we wanted to throw it in the show today is that there have been some, well, not super recent, but there have been some rekindling of this idea of invest in nanocrystal electricity now because it's going to be this biggest thing that ever happened here in this country. So we're going to talk about some of the history behind it and what maybe the status is now. We're also going to visit about the death of PC, or otherwise known as political correctness. It got shortened to PC to where everybody was talking about it. So our audience should know what PC is if you didn't know, political correctness. And then a couple other local issues. We have, by the way, wanted to announce coming up on Friday, and you'll start to see this now as a regular feature of the show. We have one of our outside show contributors will be joining us live out of Vancouver. There's a nutritional therapy conference that's happening in Vancouver. It's our show co-host, Jody Summers, that will be joining us out of Vancouver. And for people who have questions relative to nutrition and stuff like that, Jody will be on with us long enough that if you want to throw some questions or texts into the show that you want to bounce off of Jody, feel free to do so. There's actually some of the country's best nutritional practitioners show up at this nutritional therapy conference that's in Vancouver. And that is this coming weekend, March 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in Vancouver. So people can go to attend the thing, but there are health and nutrition practitioners like Jody that come from all around the country to attend this every year, and it's in Vancouver. I know they had it last year. I don't know how many years running it is, but I went to the one last year, and wow, there were some great presentations there and some very interesting people. So anyway, Jody will join us live from that conference on Friday as part of our Friday broadcast. So if you have a nutrition question that you'd like to pose to Jody, feel free to join us on the broadcast and pop those in there. Well, let's kick this off with a discussion about nanocrystal electricity. Kyle, what do you got? Chris, let's start with you. He's like, I got my notes. All right. So what do you got, Chris?
So I had to look it up and find out what it was because, that was today's show topic was nanotechnology. And basically, to dumb it down for everybody, it means the end of no more cords, cables, wires, routers, or batteries.
Chris, nobody dumbs things down better than you do.
Yeah, well, when you have to communicate with people, you have to break it down to their level, Kevin.
Okay.
Anyway.
That was supposed to be a joke, but yeah.
Yeah, right. But anyway, doing just, minimal research on this, just real quick, it shows that China is the leader in this industry. They're the ones that are going to be rolling this out and know the best about it. And the stocks, this is not new technology, and I'm sure we'll get to that here in a little bit. It's being pushed right now out there as like it's new tech, and like it's going to be this new tech wave of the future, and you better stop buying Bitcoin and start buying this right now. So when they announced this a while back, and it's not too long ago, I can't remember what the announced date was, the stock went from $8 a share up to $32 a share because people were so excited about it, and then it leveled back out, and right now it's about $20 a share. So if you want to invest and you like what you hear, you can turn around and invest in it after you hear this.
When you mention China, there is actually satellite evidence that are collected by other countries, ours included. When you talk about countries spying on each other.
Right. And you know, just part of my notes, and I'm sure that he'll touch on this too, because he found some of the same stuff, is that this isn't new technology. This is old technology. Nikola Tesla proved that this tech worked back in the early 1900s, and he actually built a wireless broadcast tower in 1904, and was going to get that going and you know, active. But J.P. Morgan was one of the main financial backers of the project, and they decided to pull all the funds from the project, and the tower was actually taken down and recycled for scrap to help recoup some of the costs.
So they thought it really didn't have a future.
No,
you have a picture of this tower. Pop that up on the screen here for us.
Now, the thing is that...
There it is. Isn't that gorgeous?
They didn't believe that this was, you know, possible. But everything else that I read about this shows that Thomas Edison and all the banking industry and stuff like that wanted to shut Nikola Tesla down. And they made it very hard for him to develop his technology any further because of the light bulb and that type of technology. They wanted to go that route. So, again, the people were robbed by those who want to make a profit, and this stuff just disappeared.
So here's the interesting thing for people who are not familiar with nanocrystal electricity and how this works. Well, if you're familiar with a Wi-Fi signal and you wonder, how does this device with no cord or wire to it, how does it communicate with a tower on not a similar principle, but at least you get the general idea, is that you could broadcast a electrical signal wirelessly. And in smaller scales, some of this is actually already being done.
Yeah. Well, I read
you have a wireless charger at home.
Yeah. I mean, I just set my phone on it and I can walk away.
Kyle saw his first one over at the computer store.
Well,
this past week.
Reading on this, it said that they said this tower never went operational, but they did say that he proved that it was able to send. Like, we send faxes and stuff like that nowadays with no problems. He was able to do that back then with this technology. He was able to send information overseas via this technology. So it worked. There was just the financial people didn't want him to. There's a lot of things that Nikola Tesla's that if he would have worked out and went forward with it, we would have a completely different society than what we have now today, because he was electrical genius. So this, I don't know if you guys have watched the towers, the Tesla towers, that take the electricity and can hook it up to music. Why? Of course. Why wouldn't we be able to power a light bulb without hooking it to anything in the middle of the room if he can draw the electricity like that to a tower?
Now, one of the problems he did have, though, is those experiments took a very long time. Not very long time, but they took a lot of energy. Enough to make the people that lived in the city not like him. It was a lot of energy, and he pushed for Niagara Falls to actually be a good source for hydroelectric power, because that'd be enough power to run his experiments. He was working on a death ray, which is kind of cool.
Everybody wants a death ray.
Who doesn't? And he was actually successful in powering 3 light bulbs, which he'd demonstrate to people. But again, it used so much power, it was just not really viable. But it was the right steps. And then it got shut down, of course. So that was that. But now with nanocrystal, it's becoming more and more viable and less power needed for it. It's pretty cool. And it's not just nanocrystal technology. It's not just for electricity. They have so much other so much other things it can be used. It can be used for production of hydrogen. It's removal of pollutants and toxins. It's medical imaging, biotags for gene identification, drug manufacture, protein analysis, flat panel displays, illumination, optical and infrared lasers, magneto-optical memory chips, and self-organized smart materials. It has so much like options to be so many things. It's really cool technology, and I'm really excited to see how it's going to progress through the years. Again, this is not really new technology, but with the new hype, I hope more people jump on board and more scientists would do that.
Well, there's
You know my thoughts on this.
what are your thoughts on it?
Unless they could, just, you know, I'm one of those people that believe that power should be a basic human right, seeing how healthcare is too. Because if we took power away,
You did say that this morning.
yeah, I did say that. If we took all the power away, there's a majority of the population, the percentage of the population that will not survive. They just won't know what to do without power. And so, watching them manipulate this over the years, I mean, we could have been a lot further along than we are right now if it wouldn't have been for the greed. So.
Talking about free power, in 2011, they're actually able to make solar panels. And we think of solar panels like the ones that we have behind us, these boys. Well, in 2011, they had ones that were 600 times thinner than a decimal point, like a period, like on a piece of paper, 600 times thinner, and you could apply it to anything. You want it on your windows, it's on your window now. You want it on your house, you can apply it to your house. You can put it pretty much anywhere, and it's a solar panel. That technology is pretty cool, and because it's nanotechnology and it's pretty much working with atoms, it's quantum mechanics. I believe that's what it is. I didn't take the class, but yeah.
We were just using Google.
But at that level,
Our Google engineer over here. Yeah.
at that level, things don't work as it should be. Things work backwards. Things are different. Like you think it's going to go this way, but it does something else entirely. So it's like trial and error, and it's actually pretty cool. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with it.
So what do you find on electrical storage? Because one of the downfalls of solar generated electricity, wind generated electricity, because they're also contingent on what either the sun and or the wind blowing, you know, and those two things are erratic. And the troubles that we've had in this area using those is that, as far as the energy sources, that they're been extremely expensive. For one, when people are seeing their power bills going up through the roof, part of it is the legislation in the state of Washington is taking things like hydropower out of the renewable energy category, or it's not in it, period. And they're the bill, and I forget how many years ago this is now, but it's actually not that long ago. I'm thinking 7 or 8 years. When was it that we passed this?
How is hydropower not renewable?
I know. Of course, it's a big joke. It's a big joke. How is hydropower not renewable? It makes zero sense whatsoever.
Should we be doing anything else in our area? I mean, for God's sakes, we have hydro everywhere.
This area is the envy of states all across this country who are wishing they had hydropower. But there are factors. When you talk about environmental extremism, that's perfectly it.
Oh, we have a lot of those in our area.
Yeah. And claim that hydropower is damaging to the environment. And I think it's amazing. You know, water runs by turns the turbine. The water is going to run that direction anyway. People will say, well, there's an impact on the fish. Well, here's a really interesting thing. Don't mean to get too far off track with this, but we've seen this huge growth of the sea lions and seal population in this area, right? And over in Astoria, you can actually go to Astoria now and see thousands of these beasts like all over the docks.
Stop it. You're going to make the enviros cry.
Yeah.
That's too much logic. So you're saying, Kevin, that the seal population and being out of control because the animal lovers won't let us kill the seals is affecting the salmon?
Without any question whatsoever. Their impact on salmon population in the river is so many times beyond a impact that any dam or use of hydropower could make on them.
It's much more fun to blame us, though. Much more fun to blame.
Much more fun to blame the. Well, you know what? We're actually going to get to some of that because we're also talking about political correctness.
Yes, we are. This all ties together.
Yes, it does. And political correctness having this connection between, or the difference between the truth and what people are referring to as your truth. So, but the truth is that the sea lions and seals are, without any question, there's nothing that comes even close. You could remove 30 things that supposedly impact salmon population in the rivers, and if you don't get rid of the sea lions,
I've tried to impact salmon population on the river, but I just don't do very good at it, and I can't seem to pull them out. So
you can't seem to.
They just go right on by my rod.
Yeah, they just like.
So
all year long this year.
So talking about hydroelectricity and about fish, I saw this really cool video on Facebook. It's called a salmon cannon. You guys heard about that?
I haven't seen that, but
Does it
salmon cannon sounds familiar.
If it involves shooting fish out of a cannon, this just sounds totally safe.
Explain the salmon cannon.
Okay.
Safe.
One thing I love about the internet, you can just pull things up and it's right there at your fingertips. So this right here is a salmon cannon, and it propels fish over dams. So we usually have like fish ladders, right? And they can jump up there. Well, this one is like it's a tube, and it's not like explosive. It's either like a conveyor belt system, or they just have constant water pushing up,
shooting up the thing, and basically the current takes them up the.
And it literally just sends them up all the way to the top of the dam, and it's 99% invisible, so you don't even know this exists, but it shoots fish, and with it, I'm pretty sure you can count fish better, so you can get a better understanding how much salmon are going up the dams. So
now, hey, along this illustration that we have over here of this fish coming out of this tube.
Why is the tube coming from the woods?
I don't know.
All right.
Well, you look at how far that tube goes. It probably goes down to some water source somewhere. But for people who might wonder, like, you look at this and you go, would a fish actually swim through a pipe like that? Well, the answer is absolutely yes. Now, there's I got to share this footage here. We'll do this on some other show. But there's a really interesting type of fish trap that people in other countries have used, and all they do is they lay these pipes right along the riverbank. They dig a hole in the side of the bank.
Yeah, that's cool. How they catch a fish,
and they cover them up, and these fish just swim right in those pipes, and they come back at the end of the day in this
mud eels
dugout. Yeah, there it is. There it is. Put that on the screen.
I watched this video a couple of months ago.
Now,
crazy.
So they swim right into the pipe and end up in the pit, and the fisherman comes back and. All kinds of fish.
Now, just to point this out there, this photo is fake news because all these fish on there are actually photoshopped in, but this actually does work. This is just like
100% does
I've
work.
seen a video where the kids came and did this, and it looked like they used a shovel from the Stone Age.
Take one of these other images over to the side that have, because the way I've seen this built is multiple tubes coming out of the water and into that's another depiction of it. But fish swim right into the ends of those pipes.
Yeah, I was watching them catch mud eels.
There you go. That's one of the most common depictions of it right there, is swimming right through the pipe and into the pit and caught.
I've seen them actually use this for crabs too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, one of the pits that I saw one of the fishermen emptying out actually had both crabs and fish in it. The guy just stands in there and he's just reaching around and pulling all this stuff out. I don't know if I'd do that. He was a little more courageous than I am, I guess. All right, so you see there's a lot of different ways in which energy can be generated, and this whole topic around nanocrystal electricity. I think part of it is that when you mentioned that this is not new technology, Chris, is that things do run cycles, though. Somebody comes up with an idea, somebody later grabs that idea, moves it a little bit further down the road. Maybe it takes off, maybe it doesn't. Somebody later grabs that idea again and kicks the can down the road. So we've actually, this whole subject around nanocrystal electricity has been something that has been kicked down the road since the early 1900s.
Right. I'm just saying that
we've got 100+ years.
Some kind of shenanigans that went on that kind of suppressed the technology for a while. But now we're past that, and
there are always monetary shenanigans that come into play in almost everything.
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of the things I've read about, Nikola Tesla and the technology he was using is that they suppressed him a lot. Like I said, they kept this guy down because he had really good gifts to give the world. But they were gifts that he was going to give for free. And, I guess you call them evil people of the world, decided that they didn't want that to happen. And, it's like the guy who made the car that ran on water. What car? What guy who ran on water? Where'd he go? He's just gone. But there was a car that ran on water, and it did it efficiently and well. And the guy's
I
gone,
told you that I
gone,
witnessed I was part of a company, and I'll share this story on another day because it's too long to tell today, but I'll just give the framework of it. I witnessed an electric car drive a 5.5-hour trip and come back on a single charge with a completely different kind of battery technology than what we see in play today, but saw that back in 1995.
Take the Geo Metro, for example, just a real quick one. For, in the early 90s when the Metros came out, it was 54 miles to the gallon on the freeway and 40-something, in town. And this was going to be the future of cars and blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden the federal government decided the standard was going to be 30-something miles to the gallon is what people were going to strive for. So they actually lowered the standards. Every time that somebody gets further in technology, unless they can figure out a way to control it and make more money off of it, they dial it back. They want control. It's about control.
Well, so that we don't run out of time today, I want to have some conversation about political correctness. And so let's move to the PC subject. And here's one of the elements that's in the title of our show today is the death of political correctness. And so when you think about PC and how common it is in terms of language, I'm not saying that political correctness is gone, but what I mean is that the days of neutralizing the truth is no longer on top of this argument, as it was for many years. And it started to happen already in 2015, came full circle in 2016. 2017 was just an acceleration of all of this. I have a few different examples that I want to share, but I'm curious what you guys think. What were some of the contributing factors to PC disappearing to the extent that it's no longer the main factor? We're now you're seeing more and more of the truth being important to people.
The reason was, Kevin, is that everybody was turning into a bunch of sissies who were unable to say what needed to be said. Sometimes in life, some things have to be said, and they can only be said certain ways. And sometimes they aren't all rosy and they aren't pleasant, but those things need to be said. And with all the people that don't want to get offended out there, they have completely shut free speech down, because all they have to do now to shut down speech that they don't like is say, that's offensive. What you said is offensive to me, and you should be ashamed of yourself. You shouldn't even open your mouth again. And that's, we're seeing people, they're tired of that.
But there are pockets in which there are pockets around the country and in some communities where there may be more active of that kind of language. People saying, I'm offended by what you're saying, or I'm offended by what you're doing, or whatever. And there is some inappropriate behavior that's happening on both sides of this is mostly around politics is where this is happening. But the thing is that more and more people are recognizing that there is the truth, and then there is something that Oprah Winfrey did a lot of talking about, and that was your truth. She would say, embrace your truth. Well, there's all kinds of examples of where your truth is completely this fallacy that if you want to believe in, you can, but it's not true. And then there's the truth. And let me just give you one of the examples of where we heard people talking about your truth versus the truth. You'd hear people say, he's not my president, and they're referring to President Trump. They'd say, he's not my president. That is your truth. For the individual who's saying this, they're going, this is my truth. He's not my president. But what is the truth?
The truth is
He's the president, whether you like it or not.
President.
Yeah, the truth is he's the president. End of story.
No, it's a weapon that I feel that has been used by the progressive left to shut down people that oppose them. Mm-hmm. You go to city council meetings right now here locally, and you see all of them because they don't like the truths that are being spoken. They now try to turn that language into offensive. And we've watched it. They actually tried to shut down a guy by the name of Bill Josh, saying that he is a bully. His language is offensive. They say the same things about me, but it's not. You know, if you are that easily offended that you can't hold a conversation with somebody, or don't leave your house. Just keep going. You know, and it's again, it's a weapon that they are trying to use against people to keep them quiet. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad to see that it's starting to go away.
It's dying because people are sick and tired of a alternate reality of truth.
You nailed it right there. Yeah. You nail it. You have some people that just, there was a protest that happened recently out in front of the thing. It was cold. It was windy out. Mm-hmm. And somebody asked if they could take some pictures, just to give an example of how of an alternate reality some of these people mm-hmm. are living in.
That's what it is.
It's freezing cold. Can we take your picture? And everybody in the pictures, and you can see it in the picture, everybody held up the signs right underneath their faces like this. Number one, it was cold out. It helped as windbreak. Number two, so you could read the signs. Mm-hmm. That was the reality. Mm-hmm. Now, the person's reality, their person's reality is that we were all hiding our faces with our signs, which isn't true because you can see our faces. I mean, it's just, but the reality that some of these people that they live in is just unreal. And sadly, they are able to convince other people of their reality, and it's scary.
I'll give you a few examples of where political correctness was attempted, and then they just paid a huge price for it. Because when I say that the general population likes the truth, well, you have these noisy minorities that can exist on both sides of the political aisle, and they create their own truth, or the your truth, I'll refer to it as, and that your truth exists in the extreme actions of people on both sides of the political party. In the middle is this big group of people who really appreciate the truth. So let me give you an example of where somebody was using your truth or their truth in alternate in place of the truth. So University of Missouri, you remember all the Black Lives Matter stuff that was going on campus over there, and they became this big proponent of what was going on in the Black Lives Matter movement. Well, freshman enrollment for the fall of 2016 was down nearly 3,000 students. That's called the truth, responding to your truth, which is really bad for the budget. So let me give you an example of how much this costs the university. For every 100 fewer Missouri undergraduate students are on campus, the university loses $1 million in tuition revenue, and that rises to $2.5 million for 100 fewer undergraduates from outside the state. So the number was 3,000. Okay, so take $30 million if those were all in-state people, and as much as $70 million if they were all out of state. So anywhere between $30 and $70 million is what it cost them to be embracing their own truth on the campus. And the general population says, that's not the truth, and we don't want anything to do with your campus. And that's a pretty heavy price tag for the truth.
Yeah, we saw another example of it this morning right before the show. We watched Jay Inslee try to tell President Trump what his truth was on guns in schools.
Yeah.
At which point we saw President Trump go like this and tell Jay Inslee what the truth was.
Yes. We could, if you find that link later, by the way, post it to Northwest Digital News.
Yeah, it was great. Jay Inslee thought he was going to take it to President Trump this morning on some issues, and just got totally owned by the president.
No, I want to say something directly to Governor Inslee, if you're out there listening or you catch this show. You made a comment.
Sure
you made a comment in the White House that you said at no percentage would school teachers be interested in arming themselves and defending their students, which is one of the options that President Trump threw out there in recent days about this. Now, first of all, Mr. Governor, that you don't know is I also know many school teachers too. Your anecdotal evidence of talking to a handful of teachers somewhere. Of course, there's teachers who don't want to wear and or be armed in school.
Right.
But I can tell you that when this statement was made, and the minute my wife heard it, who's the music teacher and taught for a number of years in a school in Minnesota, her classroom actually was one of the first classrooms you'd have to walk past coming through the glass entries of the store or into the school rather. And the first thing she said when she heard that is, I'd be one of the gun carrying teachers in school. And you know what? I've seen her shoot a rifle at 100 yards. I've seen her shoot a handgun. She's not the person that a shooter wants to be on the other side of a handgun from. I can tell you that. There were teachers across the hall as well that here's a teacher who would gladly carry a firearm to protect their students and the livelihood of the school. And I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm just thinking, because I was familiar with the layout of the school, and I'm thinking, hey, there is potentially 3, 4, 5 teachers already. Percentage-wise, this is already becoming because this is a relatively small school. It's a kindergarten through grade 8. And I'm sitting there thinking, there's already a substantial percentage of teachers in that school alone that would be interested in being the armed guards for their kids.
Just to give you a heads up, I did a poll and on one of our local websites here on whether they think that this legislature should make it legal for cities and counties to put armed teachers in the school. Well, right now, according to state law, there is nothing that stops us from doing that. The teachers have to go through similar training as a police officer to be armed in school. And then I got messages from some police officers and, well, you could already do that. And I said, well, you guys have missed the point of the question. The question was, should we change gun laws to allow for cities and counties, which means Cowlitz County can decide their own policy on putting guns in schools.
Absolutely.
Seattle can decide their own policy in setting schools, because you know what? Guns in Seattle schools might not make sense. Where guns down here in our area, it absolutely makes sense. I mean,
here's the thing too, is think about, I'm not planning on putting my kids into public school. My kids will always
put my kids in
my kids will always have an armed guard around them. I can tell you that. But I'm not, and I'm not planning on putting my kids into public school. But if I was going to put my children into public school, one of the criteria would be what do you actually do for security in this building? I don't want to have to be the person who stands on your campus and around your campus to be the person who provides security because the school fails to do that. If they didn't have security, the kids wouldn't be there, period. End of story.
Again, statistically speaking, school shootings are not something that we generally have to worry about. It's just something that's happened recently, and I blame some of the media for since making it so. I mean, they just won't stop covering anytime there's a shooting.
Well, we're talking about political correctness, and this actually ties into the subject you just mentioned about school shooting. The reality is, though, is that it does happen. It's you can say that generally it's not something you have to worry about, and it's not something you should have to worry about at all. But it is something you should plan for and be prepared for. And this shooting that took place down in Florida, when you start talking about your truth versus the truth, the responses that took place happened with regard to this from the Your Truth crowd. We saw CNN hold a town hall that has been exposed on a number of levels now to be nothing more than a hoax. I'm going to give you an example of one of the statements made by a kid at the town hall, the CNN town hall. These are people, folks, for you out there viewing, you go out and watch this. These are people acting in bad faith. These are people with a purpose to push an agenda. And there's nothing more despicable in my mind in politics than the demonization of people who disagree with your viewpoints. And so essentially, this is what this kid says. This is both a probably one of the most immoral statements that somebody could make on live TV, and nobody on the CNN panel calls this guy out. There's a clip of this boy who says, he stands up, he's facing Senator Mark Rubio, and he says, Senator Rubio, it's hard to look at you and not be looking down the barrel of an AR-15 and seeing Nicholas Cruz. He is putting Rubio basically in the same role and position as the shooter in the school. Totally an immoral statement. Rubio did not shoot anyone. He does not advocate for anyone being shot. He is not in favor of any shooter. He's not in favor of harming any children in any schools anywhere. This is a shockingly immoral and despicable statement being made by a kid on a CNN show. That line being handed to him by CNN. Now, you know what? For people who might want to say, Kevin, you're wrong. We don't think that was a setup.
Actually, we think that's right, Kevin.
Yeah. For people who may say that I'm wrong and the statement was not handed to them by CNN, well, there's any person with an ounce of logic and a reason on that CNN panel. I'll tell you what, if I held a public forum like this and one of the people got up publicly and made this statement to whoever is on that stage, I don't care who it is, but we're not talking about the shooter, okay? Stands up and tells that person, when I look at you, I'm essentially looking down the barrel of an AR-15 and seeing Nicholas Cruz. I would have stood up immediately and said, first of all, that's completely improper. It's completely despicable. It's completely immoral. And if that is the statement that you want to make, kid, you can sit your butt down. And then I would immediately tell any of the other kids who had anything to offer there that day.
You're leaving the whole racism part out of it here, too. I mean, the kid targeted that comment against him because the Cruz kid was, where's he from? Senator Rubio's family. They're from Cuba.
Yeah.
And so is the shooter. So, well, his heritage is from there.
Yep.
So he just tied them together. I mean, there's all kinds of wrong things with this kid's statement, but that was the first one, like you said, is comparing the two just because of their looks and their name.
So the CNN, my point is that the CNN forum was nothing more than a forum designed to drive an immoral wedge between American people. That's all it was about. Okay, nothing being solved there, and there were kids who were interested in being a part of that and wished to make a statement. We played one of them here last Friday, wishing to make a statement at this forum and declined to do so. Now CNN came out and attempted to disparage this one kid who had made his comment publicly. Well, now there's others saying the exact same thing, and if you notice. In every school I've ever been in any classroom that I've ever had anything to do with, and any group of kids I've ever had anything to do with, I can tell you this: there's a whole wide spectrum of understanding among all of those kids as what ought to be done. And you notice that their panel was only kids with a given viewpoint, one viewpoint, and that's it. So completely a despicable forum that they did there. And CNN was all about furthering your truth message as opposed to the truth. So complete nonsense.
Here's some un-PC stuff here, real quick here. I'll just show you guys an example of something that's un-PC. If you are inside this nation right now today, and you are calling for gun confiscation, get out. Un-PC. But I mean it. Get out. Our nation is founded on the Second Amendment. We aren't going to confiscate any guns, and we aren't going to pass any laws that are, I mean, even the bump stock laws in Washington State just went, they didn't pass them. However, they did pass, and we'll be talking about more of this in the future, our ability to check up on our legislators and what they're doing. They have taken away our ability to do records requests. So we'll be talking about more of that in the future too, just in Washington State. So the people are really starting to lose in Washington State, and I'm hoping after watching this exchange between our governor this morning and President Trump, I'm hoping that President Trump uses every bit of his power to drop the hammer on Jay Inslee in Seattle and everything that they are doing that goes against what Trump wants. He's turning our state into a sanctuary state. You know what, President Trump, drop the hammer, release the Kraken, go after him. Go after him. No, we need help in our state. I mean, we really do. And we need, help from a good leader, and that's President Trump. And I wish that he would spend a lot more time here. I know it's probably not a good idea for him. Somebody's asking if they think he should raise the age to buy an AR-15.
You know what? I don't think an 18-year-old kid, if somebody goes through I remember even going through the Army and having 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds that were in the same platoon that I was in. and spending time even around soldiers that are of that age, and they're kids that are coming from a different walk of life. I mean, there's a special brand of courage that a soldier has that you don't find just in. So we're already talking about a different crust of people to begin with. They're people that have higher moral standards. You can say that in general. They're people that do more to hold themselves responsible for their own actions. You see things, when you look at Army values as an example that were on the wall of everywhere we ever trained, things like loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage. Those aren't words you hear being handed around in common society among people, but yet that's the language that you hear there. Having said that, this kid who's 18, 19 years old, he was 19 years old, the shooter was. You look at all, some of this younger generation that's coming out of high school and how confused many of them are by whether just, a bad upbringing or things that are going on in society or whatever. I think there's argument for the fact that an 18-year-old kid shouldn't be able to buy a AR-15. And I think you're actually going to see that happen somewhere along the line, that there needs to be a level of responsibility that a person has to accomplish. And when you think about, I see that. Do you think it should be 21 for handguns?
No, he's asking if the air rifle should be.
Well, there's also a question there about being 21 along with handguns.
He's saying that he thinks it should be 21 with the same as handguns. Mm-hmm. Now, my question is, Brandon, you asked, do you think, you said that you own one and that you're 18 and you own one and that you don't think you should own one. Now you're asking us up here if we think that you should own one. So my next question would be, are you going to go shoot up a school? Are you going to use that AR-15 to go out and kill a bunch of people that you don't need to? If the answer is yes, then no, you probably shouldn't have one. If the answer is no, you aren't going to do anything like that, and you're going to use the gun to protect yourself and your property or your family, then absolutely, I think you should be able to own one if that's what the laws are. When it comes to gun safety, I was taught gun safety by relatives and family members. Mm-hmm. So again, it's not the government's job to take care of us and make sure that we don't hurt ourselves. That's our job. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if you can pass the laws and you have ill intent inside you, absolutely you should be able to own one at the age of 18.
There are, when I mentioned that being in the military and being around 17 and 18-year-olds who are soldiers, there were some of them that I can tell you even through our process, the military process, didn't make it through the Army because they were deemed to not be suitable to carry an M16 and or somebody to be around weapons systems. So there's a certain amount of soldiers that fall out of that process, and that's part of the evaluation. So even in this group of kids that, like I said, are adhering to a little higher standard in terms of character and morality and everything else, that you still have a given percentage of them that aren't really ready for that kind of responsibility. And I think about somebody who's 18 years old. I recognize that the laws are that currently that they could own a AR-15 or handgun or whatever. I think it's largely situational. But I know plenty of kids who, first of all, haven't figured out even an ounce of what they're going to do with their life when they've left school. Is this somebody you want to throw a AR-15 into their hands? I see the argument for why not.
I can see the argument, but again, we aren't factoring in our area. Kids are introduced to guns at a very young age around here. Okay, so there's a lot of kids that have gone through hunter safety courses, courses how to handle guns, and all of these things, not to mention plus what they're taught by their parents. So again, this goes back to my question, my poll question that I put up. Should a state allow for cities and counties to make their own gun laws? Because it's going to be different in Seattle than it is here, or Spokane, or Yakima, or Los Angeles. And we keep trying to think that these gun laws are going to fit all of one problem, and that's not working. Every time we restrict a gun, you can't. Prohibition doesn't work. It doesn't work. And what you're going to end up with is like Chicago, where you have hundreds of people getting killed every year because they don't have the ability to defend themselves because they live in a gun-free zone, and the police and the bad guys are the only ones who have guns. So, you know, our nation was founded off of guns, Second Amendment, and I believe that that is what we need to stick to.
Well, when you think back to the Revolutionary War, a lot of those soldiers that were part of the early Minutemen were actually the young sons of farmers standing along those fence lines and fighting for our country. And when you mention about young people, I know plenty of young people that are very responsible with weapon systems. I wouldn't have any problem with any gun that they wanted to own. So when I said that, I think it depends a lot on the person that you're talking about. There are parents and families who, I'm aware of a number of them. I've actually been on the shooting range and been shooting out there and seeing 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds out there shooting as well. And beating. I'm talking in terms of shooting proficiency. Beating some of the older shooters there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen that. There was a video that ran a couple of years ago at like an 8 or 9-year-old girl who was a competition shooter. Man, I wish I could hit a target that often. But, you know, the more that we restrict guns and the more that we teach people that these are evil and all that stuff, the worse it's going to get. It's not going to get any better if you restrict the gun laws. It hasn't yet. It hasn't changed a thing yet. What did you say this morning about the shooter in Florida? Gun laws wouldn't have stopped that. Doesn't matter what gun law they passed.
The unfortunate truth is the sheriff's department didn't do anything to stop this guy. The FBI didn't do anything to stop this guy. When you want to talk about having some kind of clue, so we were just visiting just a moment ago about, you know, should an 18-year-old own a AR-15? I think part of it has to do with what their sense of responsibility is. And now let's talk about the FBI and the Sheriff's Department. What do you suppose is their sense of responsibility? What do you think is their responsibility when somebody alerts them that there's a problem child who is, and this thing with Nicholas Cruz, this actually goes back at least a couple of years and maybe more. Do people know? Now, this number has been disputed, but the number that Sheriff Israel did not dispute is the number that was said directly to his face by Dana Lesh from the NRA. She said directly to his face, "Were the 39 visits to the Cruz family home not enough for your sheriff's department to know that this was a problem kid? Did you guys know that besides the FBI being alerted about these threats he was making online and the FBI claiming, well, we didn't know who it might have been or whatever? Are you kidding me? Is this the FBI who says they have access to all these great tools and whatever else, you can find out anything, and this is supposed to be the FBI who, you know, is investigating even our president and other people? Is this the FBI who cannot find this kid who the sheriff's department went to 39 times at least? There was actually a report on this morning that it's 45 visits.
My question is, okay, because this is such a tough issue because there are people out there that probably shouldn't own guns. We have a couple of them here in Longview. That in Kelso that shouldn't own guns. When you speak to the proper people about that, because of the way the gun laws are, they might agree with you 100% that this person shouldn't own a gun, but there's nothing they can do. Their hands are tied. I've been in this conversation with our current sheriff with concerns of people in our area who own guns that shouldn't. And there's just nothing that they can do unless they actually commit a crime.
Okay, well, what about so let's throw this one out there, because there has to be and I'm curious for anybody in law enforcement out there who has a thought on this, wants to share this. The family, I'm talking about Nicholas Cruz's family, called the Broward County Sheriff's Office last November, begged the sheriff to deal with Nicholas Cruz, saying that he was a school shooter in the making.
He was a self-proclaimed school shooter.
Now, they didn't even do a report on this guy. They didn't even follow up on this thing. They didn't even do a report on this. Is Sheriff Israel, who a week later, let me go back to just a couple things that people may not be aware of here with regard to Sheriff Israel. Sheriff Israel when people have already heard now that there was a deputy who is connected to the sheriff's office who was a on-site. This is a Scott Peterson. He was the on-site guy who does not enter the building. Did you know that there was also 3 sheriff deputies who showed up from Sheriff Israel's department who also did not enter the building? There were 4 of these cowards from the sheriff's department that did not enter the building while an active shooter, a madman, is in there shooting up innocent children.
Was there a reason behind that? I mean, they're going to have to answer.
I'm going to tell you what the reason is, Chris, because this totally pisses me off. This is a leader, Sheriff Israel, who is nothing but a coward, and this is a sheriff who has failed all of his people and his community on a number of different levels. He is either grooming cowards, and he's a coward himself, or he ordered these deputies not to enter the building before they showed up over there. And then to show you that he is not honesty. So this is the difference between your truth and the truth. The truth is that city manager from Coral Springs, Mike Goodrun, on February 15th, this is a day after the shooting, he confronts Sheriff Israel and he says, "What is this about my people?" He's talking about the police chief and the local police. "What is this that my people show up on the scene of the crime minutes after your sheriff deputies do, and the city law enforcement are the first people into this building?" I'll tell you right now, if in our community, if Sheriff Mark Nelson and his deputies showed up on the scene of a shooting, what do you think the chances are they'd be waiting outside, waiting for the Kelso police and the Longview police?
Would be the first guy through the door.
He'd be the first guy through the door because he is not a coward like Sheriff Israel. That's what, and I'm telling you guys this on a number of levels. If I was, let's just take the police out of this, and let's say this happened somewhere near a military base where I was a military commander at one time, and I have soldiers at my disposal that I can send over to the situation. I hear there's an active shooter going on. If I would have sent these 3 soldiers over to that building, and then I learn that some other agency shows up after these guys and they end up being the first people, I would have these guys court-martialed. I would have them written up. I would have them court-martialed, and I have these soldiers kicked out of my units. I would make a public disgrace out of these people, out of these soldiers, because nobody has any business accepting the authority of carrying a weapon for the purpose of public defense and then failing to do their job in this situation. So, and here's the going back to this political correctness. So here's Sheriff Israel clearly pushing a anti-gun agenda on CNN and all these different networks. You know what? A week later, Sheriff Israel, you were on the news saying that you were still looking into this information, that you had heard. So apparently there was some video about your deputies not showing up in the building, and you were doing your due diligence to establish what the accurate facts are. Where you're full of crap, Sheriff, because the city manager from Coral Springs, one day after the shooting, got in your face and said, "Why were my law enforcement officers the first one in that building?" Not because he was disappointed about somebody not being in there ahead of him. He was simply saying they arrived after your deputies and they're the first ones. They're the only police officers with courage to enter the building and face this madman. Absolutely nuts. Sheriff Israel, you need to be gone. The governor needs to kick you out of your position, and you and your deputies who didn't go into that building need to be investigated, because either you're the 4 biggest cowards in the county, or there's something going on in your department. There's some other agenda here being pushed, and if that's the case, well, I'd have a different way of handling cowards like you.
I want to answer Brandon's question.
That's the non-political,
non-PC
way of dealing with that issue.
So Brandon asked, do you guys think Cruz should get the death penalty? I'm going to leave my personal belief out of here, but what I will tell you is that I did a couple of polls on this. One of them asking whether do you think Cruz should get the death penalty. I ran that poll on Cowlitz County News, and a majority of the people said, yeah, fry him. I also ran a poll on the same site asking if they believe that teachers should be armed in schools. I did not think that that was going to go the way it did, but apparently majority of our local citizens believe that teachers should be armed. So these, Brandon, yeah, fry him. I mean, in our state, we couldn't because our governor is taking away the death penalty with our, well, you know, that they're taking that away this year. But if they were going to give the death penalty to somebody, yeah, it would be this guy.
I can tell you this much, Mr. Sheriff Israel, that had I been anywhere in that parking lot or near that building, the minute I heard the pop of that weapon going on in that building, I would have been in there immediately with my gun in that guy's face, and the shooter would have been dead. I cannot believe. And so these are guys who this is their job, this is their responsibility. They're supposedly being trained to respond to this kind of situation, and so on all the different levels, I'm just talking about. Not only was the situation completely botched by people that are supposed to be there to protect public safety, but everything leading up to this, the 39 or 45 visits, whatever it is, I'll tell you what, if it's 10, you guys got problems, but it's 4 times that. And then the FBI also being alerted that there's a problem with this guy with a posting that he's doing online, and they claim we talked to the guy who said somebody put the post up, but we weren't able to follow this up as to who it was. Baloney. Completely baloney.
What amazes me is that some person in his mom's basement over there in Kelso, you know, up there in North Kelso, can say that he's going to harm Donald Trump, and the FBI out of Vancouver show up right away.
Interesting, isn't that?
You know, and come to find out it wasn't founded, but yet this guy here posts on his personal page that he's going to be a school shooter, and everybody around him knows that he's going to be a school shooter, and the police have been there 45 times, and the parents have even said that you got to do something about him, and this guy just, nobody did their jobs here.
No.
Well, go ahead.
Okay, so when I was in high school, we had a gun threat. It was basically just a rumor. It actually wasn't real. This kid was getting bullied a lot, and everyone kind of knew that. He was a little bit troubled. But it was completely false. It was a complete rumor. He wasn't actually going to that. He never made that comment. But what happened was the police came, and they literally took him to the police station for questioning, and he was held there for a while. Mm-hmm. A complete rumor that was completely false, that might have been real, and they literally took him to the police station and held him there for questioning. Mm-hmm. It was.
I get what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
How could it fall through the cracks like this? How could they? And they just did. You know, one of the other things that I read early on was several of the officers that were first to arrive on the scene. Mm-hmm. Their kids were in the school, so. You know, I don't know if that was a factor into them not wanting to enter right away because they didn't want to go in and see if their child.
Wait a minute. Are we talking about the sheriff deputies, or are we talking about the local law enforcement?
I don't know which law enforcement it was at this point. I just know that some law enforcement that showed up early to the scene, their kids were in that school. And so there was a few of them that may have had some issues there, but still no excuse for not going in. I don't know if they're the same officers.
There is zero justification and zero excuse for them not going.
So why hasn't this guy been fired yet then? I mean, if he is that derelict of in his duties, will there...
I'm already aware of the fact that there are several political leaders, senators, and members of the House of Representatives that have already contacted the governor's office and said this guy needs to be dispatched.
I mean, that would be...
So I'm far from being the only person to say that needs to be done.
Right. Well, no, this is the first time hearing, you know, of all of... I mean, I'd heard that this is the first time hearing of this. I mean, this is what cracks me up. This is what irritates me about every time we have a shooting in this country is that we get reports on it, and then all of a sudden the next bit of information that comes out is like concrete, solid evidence, right? Mm-hmm. This is what happened. Here's what happened, everybody. And then like 2 days later, we get a different story. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit different from the first one. And then another week later, we get another version of the story. And that's how these things go. You know, it's don't listen to the information that you get right after these shootings, because most of that information isn't going to be accurate. Wait a couple of days before you decide, gather all the information, then make your decision on the shooting and what should happen. Don't do like the gun grabbers and go, we've got to take guns. I mean,
it's not the answer. It never has been the answer, and there is no statistical proof anywhere in the country and anywhere in the world that grabbing people's guns is the way that you end these types of atrocities.
Yeah, and seriously, these people that are talking gun confiscation, that's almost like inciting more violence. There's people that aren't going to give up their guns, and they're going to have to be taken by force. And hopefully we don't see any of those reports or that starts happening. I mean, but we've got to quit talking like we're going to take away all the guns and start confiscation. That can't happen.
So let's wrap this up with this. Part of where this subject, and we kind of morphed into another subject, we were visiting about the death of political correctness. And we just want to mention this or pose this question. So I want you guys to think about this, and we'll wrap it up with this. So think about what are the obvious prejudice, or how is the obvious prejudice in publishing of fake news by mainstream media contributing to the death of political correctness? So think about the response and reaction that people across the country are having to the fact that so much of the mainstream media is showing their prejudice and publishing of fake news, and so quick to do this. Sheriff Israel just being an example of somebody who's part of the fake news crowd, because everything that he's saying and sharing, whatever else, tell you what, listen to all the news. This guy will not ever take an ounce of responsibility for what happened. True leaders take ownership. They're accountable. They take responsibility. People who are not leaders, but rather are losers, use things like blame, excuses, denial. Listen to Sheriff Israel. All you hear out of him is blaming others, making excuses for his people, and being denial of the real truth. I think
I said that last week, is quit trying to place blame here.
Yeah.
If you're going to place blame on the shooter, the person that actually went in, lost his mind, and killed a bunch of people. That's the person who's to blame. Not the gun. It's not the ex-girlfriend that broke up with him. It's not the kids that were bullying him. It was him. Nobody else is to
go back to this
we can't
Scott
blame
Peterson.
the sheriff for not going in.
Yeah, the Scott Peterson not going into the building. If it's only one, that's a problem with character and courage of one individual. The fact that 3 other deputies show up there and do not enter the building, and that Sheriff Israel is not honestly dealing with this in the news, points to a department problem and a leadership problem, and that needs to be immediately fixed.
Did he? Yeah, I may have asked this. Did he tell him not to go in?
Were
these guys?
We don't know.
That's actually a pretty important question.
If the answer to that question is yes, that they didn't enter the building because they were ordered not to, all that does is add more ammunition to the, pardon the pun, all that does is add more ammunition to my argument that the sheriff needs to be out of his office immediately.
I think I'd like to see if they were actually ordered not to enter, because most officers that I have met or have come across care enough to where if something like this was going on, they would do their job, and that is to eliminate the threat.
Absolutely. I don't know a single police officer who wouldn't be in that building immediately.
No, I know
if there
police
was a
officer
shooter
friends
there.
that would be like, I'll go.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. And private citizens. I know tons of parents and or teachers, Mr. Governor Inslee. I know plenty of teachers, parents, everybody who would have been in that building immediately if they knew and heard or being present there with a shooter. So the fact that these deputies aren't is pure nonsense.
I saw that question. Somebody asked that question. Do you think? And I think it was here on our live stream. Asked, do you think teachers would act? And these officers didn't act. Do you think the teachers would act? I absolutely do.
Absolutely.
And I absolutely believe that there was a teacher, one of these teachers that was there, that said that they don't like guns and that they didn't want to be armed. I guarantee you that if their students in their classroom was under fire and there was a gun that they had access to, they would use it.
There's 2 teachers that I can tell you in this situation, both of whom paid with their lives. There's 2 teachers that were in that school that were shot by the gunman who would have used a weapon to defend themselves and their students without any question whatsoever. Because here's the true measure. You can say somebody behind a weapon defending themselves and doing so in that situation is a person of great courage. What about somebody who uses their own body to save the life of somebody around them?
That's what I was just going to say.
2 teachers did that in that shooting.
Right.
Sheriff Israel, that is somebody with the kind of courage that your men don't even have close to. I mean, that is disgusting.
They used
those are two teachers who, if they would have had a handgun, would have put that thing in that guy's face and shot him immediately.
They used the only weapon that they had to their advantage, and that was their bodies.
To shield their own students from the shooter.
I remember when Sandy Hooks happened, there is a woman, a teacher, that told the shooter that the kids went to the, somewhere else, that they're hiding, they're gone, and it's just her in the room. The shooter killed her, but what actually happened was the kids were all in the closet hiding. So she sacrificed herself to save all these kids. There's always going to be acts of courage and all that,
Right. And that's what I'm saying, is that the teachers that are saying that they don't need guns or wouldn't use guns, they absolutely would to protect their students.
Absolutely.
Whether they want to believe that right now, they can probably, because their mindset is that they don't like guns and they don't think that we should have them. But I guarantee you, if it came down to their students and the shooter and they had access to the gun, they would pick up that gun and they would do what they need to do to protect the children.
Without any question whatsoever. Without any question whatsoever. Tons
or
of
at least
teachers.
I would hope to think that the teachers would.
Well, I can tell you with assurance that they would. Without any doubt, they would. Have you ever seen a teacher whose kids graduated from their class and left to go on to their lives? These aren't kids that are, gone forever, but they're just graduating from the class and leaving. Have you ever seen a teacher cry when their students leave class?
Well, sure.
Absolutely. Is there any doubt whatsoever that teacher cares more about their students than these 4 cowardly deputies did outside of this school cared about those students? Is there any question?
No.
None whatsoever. That's a teacher, if they had a handgun in their hand and somebody walked in to harm their students with a weapon, would pull that handgun out in a heartbeat to defend their students.
I just hope that the 4 sheriffs or the deputies, or I forgot.
Deputies, yeah.
Deputies, the ones that were out there that didn't go in, I just hope that they actually had a good reason. Because if they're just being cowards, do you think they could hear the gunshots and the screaming? Because that's just horrible.
I'm going to tell you this right now, Kyle, is there would have been no superior commander in the world in my military line of command who could have prevented me from entering that building. Not one.
Keaton Harvey says, I'm guessing the department has a poorly written active shooter policy that says deputies secure a perimeter until a SWAT team could arrive. Just speculating, but that is the only excuse that he can think of poor policies that have led to poor training.
Yeah.
So even if they were waiting for SWAT, you can't, and when you have an active shooter situation, if you wait, people are going to die.
I'll tell you what, you got 3 deputies who arrived from the sheriff's department. There is a heck of a lot that I can do with that in terms of anybody who's done building clearing or been on a MOUT site. It's military occupation and urban training. Anybody who's done any training in that kind of facility knows that you can completely clear an area with all you need was the 3 deputies. If there was 3 people who showed up there, I'll tell you what, I could have neutralized the shooter very quickly with that kind of firepower. But I would have gone in myself. If I was Scott Peterson, I would have been in the building myself ahead of those other deputies. They're just cowards. That's the only explanation you can have for those kind of actions.
There's all kinds of things that they could have done here to probably change the situation. I mean, if they would have fired off around themselves, the shooter would have been like, that wasn't me shooting. Who was that? And then, he would have had to have, thought about what he was doing at that moment in time, and he would have known that there was...
Let me give you a few lower level beyond this shooters and all these untruth and fake news that has come out even following this event, which is really unfortunate. The truth we've been talking about here a little bit as it pertains to the shooting and some of the elements that have come out, that this was without any question a preventable crime had the people done the proper follow-up. So let's move to a few little lighter subjects. So we're talking about political correctness, and we are running out of time here too. So I'm going to give some other examples of how that political correctness in this country is dying.
I have a good one too.
Go ahead, share yours.
Okay, so this is the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name.
Yeah, Justin Trudeau.
Did you hear? So he was on a panel or questioning, and this woman was asking him a question. I don't know what it was, but she's like, so mankind, she said mankind, Justin interrupted her and said, "It's person kind." It did not accept the question at all and would not let her speak.
I almost brought this up when we were talking last week about something about how what this guy, I was going to bring it up that what this guy did was not new. It wasn't his statement. He took it from the person that Kevin read all that stuff from about the other day. Remember that but you were talking about Justice Ginsburg. She was. Yeah. All he did was regurgitate what she said.
Yeah.
That's all this guy did. He's no hero.
Yeah. There were people preaching that nonsense from the early middle 70s.
Right. All he did was regurgitate exactly what
it's person kind.
He knew that he would get some brownie points from those PC people if he did
completely a PC move. And you know, that is costing the effort to be so-called PC is costing people in a really big way. So we talked about what happened at the University of Missouri. Well, how about Colin Kaepernick taking a knee on the sidelines of the NFL? Well, I just want to share this. The decline of ratings in the NFL, immediately a huge financial impact from people who embrace the truth instead of your truth. And interestingly enough, now the truth comes into play, has its impact on the whole thing. And this last Super Bowl that was just played, who was kneeling on the sidelines in the Super Bowl?
I didn't see anybody.
Did you see anybody kneeling on the sidelines?
No,
I didn't watch it.
Nobody was kneeling on the sidelines because there is a huge cost from people who embrace the truth.
Listen, when you're about to lose your NFL contract, there is nothing you won't do to keep it.
That is right. So the truth brings around some accountability, and these people who maybe were embracing their own truth and decides to take a knee, which they can here in this country, but there is a price from people who embrace the truth, and NFL ratings went right in the toilet as a result of it. Here's another one that people probably know next to nothing about, but do you remember the all-girl version of Ghostbusters?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I watched it. Careful here, Kevin.
Okay.
You could anger a large portion of the population. Your next words.
This whole entire thing, well, this ties into the PC message.
It does.
This whole entire thing, it was a all-girl cast for the purpose of addressing this PC crowd, the politically correct crowd. Here's what happened. Columbia Pictures needed $300 million just to break even on the project. They made $200 million. People neither saw it as amusing or good or in any way. It was entirely about being politically correct, and when you put a PC message out there, the public gives you what you deserve, and that is a busted budget to the extent of $100 million. How about one of the responses to political correctness has been the emergence of tons of online podcasters and broadcasters, people just like us.
Yeah.
The citizens of this country are taking over the news, and they're challenging all of the mainstream media and all these messages out there that are clearly around PC and or fake news, because people really are interested in the truth. And the most significant nail in the coffin of the PC movement out there was the victory of Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah. It ended.
No question whatsoever. And here's an interesting thing, and I actually agree with this. Ben Shapiro the other night was asked on one of his speeches that he gave. He was asked to give a grade to President Donald Trump and what he's done as a president. And he said, on policy, I give him an A-. He goes, on legislation, I give him about a C based on what has passed. He goes, on rhetoric, he goes, I give him an F. He goes, there's all kinds of things that he has said in terms of rhetoric and everything else that didn't need to be said, didn't need to be done. He goes, in my opinion, there's many different places in which he could have handled himself differently. And I agree with that too. However, let me say this. Part of the reason, and the big factor and the reason why political correctness is dying, is because there is really nothing about Donald Trump that is politically correct. He doesn't care about any of the politically correct norms. He doesn't care about any. He just talks to people like an American.
We hired him because he's a businessman.
And he was put into office because people knew he wasn't politically correct.
Correct.
They knew that he addressed things in a brash fashion.
That was part of the problems with the Republican Party supporting him, is that he is so unpolitically correct that they didn't want to deal with him.
The leaders, there were 17 people on that stage. They're all taking him to task because there's nothing about Donald Trump that's politically correct. You're going to
see so much more stuff get done underneath this president versus the last 4 that is going to be ridiculous.
So let me say what I do appreciate about his lack of political correctness is I do appreciate that he's more interested in truth than he is about being politically correct.
I think
now, it doesn't mean that Donald Trump isn't also at the same time on this ego trip, and you mentioned that you notice that at many different events he goes to, he's always talking about how many people are there, or if people are standing up and giving him an ovation and whatever else. I mean, sometimes when I listen to that, I laugh, but I overlook that because I see what he's actually doing. As Ben Shapiro pointed out, his policy, an A-, what's happened, what we're going to see coming in terms of legislation as well, is going to be something that's going to be remarkable out of somebody that everybody thought could never do this job, and solely on the lack of political correctness.
Yeah, just if you get a chance, watch the exchange between Donald Trump and our governor of the state of Washington this morning,
Governor Jay Inslee and President Trump.
You will see at the very moment when Trump just decides that he's not going to listen to Jay Inslee anymore. It's just beautiful.
that is a face-to-face meeting between the king of political correctness and the king of non-PC.
He was just done. He was just done with it. Yeah. Crossed his arms and just done.
Yeah, so the arms crossed.
As soon as the arms crossed, I was like, oh, yeah, he's done listening.
I think Trump has a clue who Governor Inslee is.
Yeah, he does now. I've been trying to warn him, but, hey.
All right, well, I think we have at least beat this subject to death. I hope you enjoyed our conversation around nanocrystal electricity. I hope
that was totally on PC, Kevin.
Yeah, it was totally on PC. I hope you do your own research on that subject. And if you would, put your comments down below on, what do you think were the contributing factors to the rapid decline of being politically correct? Is PC actually about lies? I think the answer to that question is yes. But for our listening audience, is being politically correct actually about the failure to embrace the truth? And does party alignment encourage people to embrace PC lies? That's it for today here on Northwest Digital News. I'm Kevin Hunter with Chris Bornstead and Kyle Torgerson. Till next time.